Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. Comic book thoughts of the week. It's a little weird for me because for a second week in a row I was on on Comic Book Roundtable with Travis, just Travis and me one night, and then with Travis and Jen and Terrence, this more recent one. Anyway, it was great being on live with them and everything. But on the show, you just kind of talk about the comics you read this week, so it feels almost like I've already done all this. But on the other hand, I don't know what I might have missed, and so that in terms of my own video diary. But more I was thinking how I only sometimes watch all the way through these live hangouts, depending on my amount of time, but I always make sure to see my friends' weekly comics thoughts and hauls and things like that. So I thought I'll just go over all of what I read this week again, and some of it, little bits and pieces here, were not mentioned in that show anyway. But certainly feel free to not watch, because mostly it'll be kind of repetitive. I'll start with something I mentioned in the show, going to a store with lots of alternative comics, and that they had Moebius trading cards. These, as it turns out, are from 1993, or they're copyright 1993, so I assume they're from around then. I remember in the 90s there were a lot of interesting, sort of fun trading cards in the comic book stores. I was getting like Frank Frazetta trading cards and Boris Vallejo trading cards, but I missed the Moebius trading cards. And at this store, they just had them up front by the cash register for $1 a package, which I guess was probably the original price. And they have 10 cards in each. The cards were kind of stuck together. Here's all 20 cards now. So I thought I'd show them to you guys. I just thought it was kind of fun. For those who don't know, Moebius is kind of the one of the most revered French comic book artists, and actually has quite a large influence on American comic book artists and British comic book artists at this point, particularly sort of the whole Frank Quietly end of things. And clearly he's a huge influence on Jeff Darrow, who is in turn a huge influence on a lot of American comic book artists these days. I've been a Moebius fan since sort of discovering his weirdly simple yet not simple stories in Heavy Metal magazine that I used to stumble upon as a teenager in the late 70s. And almost all of his stuff in the US is out of print. You could get it in French, I guess, but it's very expensive in English. Like they had an old Marvel reprint of some Moebiuses from the 90s that they were selling for $30, and that was a low price. I should have grabbed it, but I didn't, because the girl at the cash register was reading it at the time, and I didn't want to say, "Hey, give me that book you're reading." Plus, maybe I wasn't ready to spend $30 on a very slight paperback trade. So I love Moebius. I sort of have this vague plan of collecting the old heavy metals and getting most of the Moebius out of that, since the collections of Moebius are actually more expensive now. Or I'm hoping that someone manages a publishing deal, maybe Dark Horse or something, to once again reprint all the Moebius classics, the Airtight Garage and Jerry Cornelius and things like that. I think he did Jerry Cornelius. But until then, I just get dribs and drabs of Moebius. It seems extremely strange that he wouldn't be in print in the U.S., given his fame. And given, how much comic book art is now in print all the time. So I should go back and grab more of these. It now occurs to me, now that I realize they're from 1993, this may be a limited supply. They may put them, they may sell out of them pretty quickly at the store. They may have just dug up an old box of Moebius trading cards. Another thing, so this store, which was called Floating Worlds, if you're ever in Portland and you're interested in more unusual comics, you should definitely go there. They don't seem to distinguish too clearly between what is old and what is new. It was hard when I was buying these, and I'll do another video after I read them about the zines that this piece of lint is bothering me. These zines that I bought, but you couldn't tell, easily and quickly what was new and what was from a month ago or a year ago, or in this case, it turns out about 20 years ago. Another artifact from the 90s, a giant size, here's a regular comic book, a giant size reprint of an issue, or maybe more than one issue, of Tales from the Crypt. As it says there, an extra large comic. And they just charged me cover price for it. And I actually went up to the cashier and said, is this cover price or is this going to cost more? And she said, oh, it's cover price. So it's not printed on really high quality paper. But it's nice nonetheless to get these in large size. That cover is by Jack Davis. At first I thought it was, at a very quick glance, I thought maybe it was by Frank Frazetta. But it's by the classic Jack Davis, who went on to do so much stuff for Mad Magazine and then in advertising all over the place. You used to see him. So there's a Jack Davis story, and I won't go through all of it. Another Jack Davis story I just flipped to. I'm more into what I love most is their science fiction magazines. I wonder if these large size reprints were ever done for the science fiction magazines. It's the first, I've seen a lot of reprints of EC Comics, but it's the first time I've seen this sort of tabloid size. So that was cool. So in reading, I've been reading this week's comics. I also reading some of the backlog I still have. One of those backlogs was Clone. I read so many. I read 6 issues of Clone in a row, maybe 7 through 12. So that's the most recent issue, 12. The main story actually does end. It felt like it would never end, but in a good way, with issue 10. And there's a clone who's been somehow Stephen Hawking'd and is super brilliant, but has a body that doesn't work very well. It's amazing how many clever ways they figured out in this series to play off of the idea of clones. And speaking of Jeff Darrow art, Moebius to Jeff Darrow, but the art in here is this incredible detailed, slightly slightly Jeff Darrow-like art in its sort of hyper-detailedness. It's fantastic coloring, too. And it's amazing, month after month, this one artist is doing the inks and the pencils, and it never lets you down. It's always good art, issue after issue. There's a really gross page. So every issue I buy it and I think, oh no, now it's going to be a less good artist in it, because this is not that well known of a comic book. The artist is going to move on to something higher paying. But he's always there doing a kick-ass job. So the one artist is doing all the work, and usually you see tons of artists. There's 3 writers working on it. I think David Schulner was the original writer, and then along with him he has Aaron Ginsberg and Wade McIntyre. I haven't heard of any of them, but they do just a kick-ass job on the twists and turns, the twistedness of the clones, the pacing, the suspense. Now, with the story ending with number 10, numbers 11 and 12 are kind of a beginning of a new story arc, I guess, and it's now that kind of the main sort of discovery of the clone world, this world with all these clones hidden in it who are being hunted down by the government. Now there is they finding new ways to sort of explore all the twists and turns and freakish results of all these hidden clones. They continue. I feel like I'm not doing this justice at all, but the fantastic art, the characterization just goes on, kind of spot on. It's relentlessly brutal and bloody, but it fits the story. It doesn't bother me at all. It should not be read by younger kids or anything like that. I believe the first two trades are out, and I would grab those. I mean, they're not expensive. I think the first one's one of those in $10 trades, and the second one's probably $15. Clone is just really good. It's kind of the hidden. I mean, the people who read it are out there saying Clone is really great, but it's not getting a huge audience so far. It's kind of the hidden gem of the image books that I'm aware of. So I just hope it keeps going. But even if it ends soon, it'll just have been this really great experience of reading Clone, and I'll definitely go back and read it. It reads great in the single issues, but it is all one long story, so it probably will read really great in trades also. So there's that, and then I also was catching up on the FF, which I don't think will read that well in trade, because reading 6 issues of that was a little tiresome. I kind of love the FF as it with Fraction and All Red, and now All Red, and All Red with just working off of Fraction's old plot. But it has all these great bits and fun little touches and twists and turns and all these fun characters. I mean, there must be 10 or 12 interesting characters going on here. But it's best when it's being humorous, and as you're trying to track the plot over many issues, it gets very difficult, because there's so much kind of randomness going on. It may be all part of an overall scheme that connects from issue 1 up to whatever issue they're going to end with, but it's hard to put together, and it feels a little too random. I'm not dissing the book at all. I just kind of wish I read it month by month and hadn't waited. I've commented elsewhere, I think that All Red has become like one of the best cover artists this year. So many cool covers, particularly like these two, the last two. And Matt Fraction no longer doing the script. It's still working well. I never read anything by Lee Allred before, but he seems to have picked up the ball that Fraction left behind and has kept it going. He may be making it a little more linear, or maybe because it's heading towards the end of the whole plot setup. So if you were to pick this up in trade, I would say read it in little chunks, read just an issue a night. This issue had some great stuff, great funny stuff with this little zone where time is out of whack, and where the old red ghost, I think he's called, and his three intelligent apes, his 3 superpowered apes, are trying to get through, and there's all these alternative versions of the Red Skull and of his, not Red Skull, Red Ghost, the Red Ghost and his apes. One of the weirder things is this weird version of the Watcher, and they've introduced the Watcher's mate. and they have the characters directly challenging the watcher about his role in things and his race's role in things and how they failed to take up pick up on the responsibilities that they should because of one failure in the past. They decided to forever just watch. So I thought that was a little cool twist on the Marvel mythology. There's other stuff that I just completely didn't understand. Like, for instance, there's all these alternate timeline dooms. I don't know where they come from, but clearly in one alternate timeline, Doom looks like Stephen Strange, and in another he looks like Namor. And maybe one of these is also Reed Richards. And I don't know who this person with the horns is. I don't know where they came from. I missed that if it was referred to earlier. It's kind of an example of how things seem to randomly pop up. And the randomness, the feeling that so many different characters and little plot touches are being juggled is fun to a point, and then it's frustrating. I think because I've just become really into Allred's art, I'm going to have to follow him over to the Silver Surfer. It would be, my rule of thumb is either get the cheap Marvel subscription, because it's going to be $3.99, either get the cheap Marvel subscription or wait for trades. But I may break down with the Silver Surfer. So I kind of wish Allred would, now that Allred's kind of hot, it might be a good time for him to team up with somebody and do an image book. But it'll be fun to see him do the Silver Surfer for a while. And it's going to be sad. I assume this is coming to an end when Allred leaves and when the current plot line set up by Fraction is set up. So anyway, we'll see where that goes. If some other creative team comes on the FF, I'll certainly give it a try. So, yeah, I've talked for 15 minutes already before getting to the main books I read this week. So, you know what? I will do another episode. I'll stop here and I'll come back in a few minutes and talk about the rest of the books I read this week.